Welcome to episode 12 of the Mindedness Revolution, where we are stitching our view of Meta-Phenomenology Mind4 together and summarizing after a series of episodes that have been led by Baron, walking us through Mind4. Hey, friend, how are you?
Great to be here, Greg. Happy to have another run at this, another
Yeah.
crack at it.
Another
Yeah.
crack at it. Well, I will tell the audience here. So when I encountered your sort of multimodal mindfulness approach, and then we bridge that in the Medium articles, which we'll make sure we'll put in there on UTIC. And I, ever since that, it was what introduced me to these four pillars, and the idea that there's a meta-systemic view of the world in general, which is certainly something I can I can have some relationship with. In fact, my mind likes to go there more than any other, probably in terms of its natural dispositions. And then awareness of self, the metacognitive self, of course, as a psychotherapist, those are really where my two minds live the best. And I didn't know Eastern traditions, but then I have prior to our conversations, but through our conversations also, widen my awareness of meta awareness of attention, meta awareness of awareness. Okay. And these four things, awareness, attention, self, and systems, to put them together, I thought was awesome in the context of the whole UTIC thing. It was beautiful. It was lovely to see. I felt the synergy on there. I felt it here. I love the fact that we can think about this in terms of Mind4. And this idea of meta-phenomenology is really sort of what we're laying out here. So thank you. And it's been edifying and a joy to walk through with you.
Awesome. So it's been fun to walk through this together, Greg. And certainly I credit you with the additional growth and maturation, or if you ask my wife, maybe the silliness, but the growth and maturation of this kind of way of going about it. And again, I think this is actually I think both of us face that within our own fields, we find the constraints and limitations that do not grip kind of a better understanding. And so this Mind4 was selfishly even a way of me trying to understand the experiential plasticity, to actually, how can I know myself as a knowing? How can I know myself as a person? How do I sometimes feel like a hyper subject as this vocality of the totality, right? That part of my own being and existence extends through space and time. And then to contract and get like neurotic about something. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? And trying to understand that.
Oh,
right?
That's possible still?
Yeah. Right. And so this, tying in our meta-phenomenology to say we have experience, we have a phenomenology, we can examine it, that it's not just a reminder to our audience that we're saying in a meta-phenomenological view that our experience is not veridical. It's not telling us the exact truth of what's happening. We laid that out in the first episode about meta-phenomenology, that it's here for fitness. It's here to help us survive today. And perhaps then if we survive a day, then it'll get better at how do we survive maybe even better tomorrow, or it extends, right? You look at human beings, that's what we've done. We extend further at our ability to have fitness. And so then we either just say subjectivity is just faulted and ignore all of it, which sounds weird to say you're going to ignore all your experience. Maybe it's not that radical. It's actually, let's examine our experience. And as you mentioned, kind of these four capacities or four ways of looking at different contents of our mindedness. So we wanted to spend some time on this episode, just kind of really fleshing out what are some potential insights or understandings we can gain from Mind4, keeping it within a naturalistic, scientific, humanistic framework. Because I almost forgot, like at the very beginning, we said we had a claim. We said we think, as we start to describe mindedness and Mind4, that if you hear it right, we're going to have a Copernican revolution of what we mean by mind. And for our audience that was thinking about how we historically as humans would always think about the earth rising, the sun rising and falling, around the Earth, and so it actually is the exact opposite, right? That the Earth is rotating around the sun, or it would be at one view. And so let's dive into what is that. If you we're literally saying we're flipping the model, and that's more accurate,
Yep.
right? Then what does that flip mean in this mindedness revolution? What does that mean in terms of mind? So this is where I think the meta-phenomenology does depend on metaphysics and metapsychological understanding. We're saying mindedness is just like livingness is a feature. Livingness is a feature of life. Mindedness is a feature of animals with complex nervous systems. We are these animals with another layer on top.
Right.
Right. And so then what would this if we're going from mindedness, we're being mind blind conceptually and culturally and also experientially, what happens when the model itself starts to become opaque? What happens when instead of if I'm looking out the window and see a tree, instead of just saying I'm seeing a tree, I actually recognize I'm looking through a window first, right? And this, so I would metaphorically say this window, and you talk about in the coin, this epistemic portal. So to me, looking at it, it looks like a portal, and say each human being has a portal within it. Within it, it is a field, right? And in that field, you can strip it all the way down to pure awareness, and there's just this knowingness that knows. You can put on the layers of a core experiential self, an embodied experiential self. We can look and we have layers of our ego and persona that come on quite easily, particularly in our complex social environment. And to say, well, what is this actually more like, right? And even some of the Buddhists got this because they would say wild things like, "I am everywhere and nowhere."
Right.
Well, that's kind of wild, there is another phenomena that's like that, and that is virtual reality, right? It's like if you put on a set of goggles, and you're seeing a field, you're seeing a whole scenario.
Where is that? Yep.
Where is it, right? And what we're trying to say is, yes, that's one type of virtual reality. You take those goggles off, you still got a set on. You're in a minded reality now.
Totally.
Right?
Let me, since you mentioned the Copernican revolution, just again, we're calling this mindedness, and we're also talking about meta-phenomenology. Let's just do a very brief pointer. We've talked a lot about Buddhism. Let's just come into Western philosophy, for a second, and think about Hume into Kant, okay, which is happening to philosophy. So Hume's an empiricist, and basically really focusing on all what we really know is our perception sensations almost, like, and whatever we can stitch together. He's really a skeptic. He loves what Newton does, but he's not sure what kind of knowledge Newton gives us. And then Kant comes along and tries to synthesize what Hume says with what Newton says, but actually he situates us in phenomenology. Kant's essentially an idealist, and he gives us a particular kind of revolution that says actually the knowledge we have about the world is through phenomenology. We can never gain access to the thing of itself, and actually human epistemology constrains, meaning how humans know. So philosophers have been, and the West too, have been noting this thing that we're talking about in a more analytic, justificatory way than as opposed to an experiential way. But nonetheless, this is a super important feature of our knowledge. And most systems are just sort of neo-Kantian in psychology, meaning, yeah, this is sort of going on. But with the Enlightenment gap, I argue, is actually we never really figured out how to put human phenomenology and the categories of mind into ontology, like our Newtonian ontology. That's one way to describe the Enlightenment gap, is that we're stuck between, we have phenomenology here, and I'm talking analytic, like what is it, how does it work, how does it create categories, and the world, as say science gives us, what's the relation, the Newtonian ontology of matter versus the Kantian phenomenology of mind and the categories of matter. Okay. I think where you talk does this, and that's not one of our primary focus, but there's another angle here. is that you can stitch that together in the Enlightenment gap. So there's an meta-systemic way to yoke our ontology and our epistemology. And now we're saying part of that angle is because we can also create a meta-phenomenology and have all of that be coherent. Like there's no mystery at the level of we don't need, and it may be true, but we don't need a supernatural God putting a magic camera in the form of a soul, God-given soul, into our head that allows us to wake up and turn from dead matter into living matter. We don't need that frame. Maybe that's true, but we can explain it all naturally. So part of this issue is this phenomenology can be placed in relationship to natural science in a way it hasn't been before. That's part of what the Mindedness Revolution grants us.
Love it, Greg. Yeah, that's spot on. And thank you for bringing in the Western philosophical side of that. And so, you know, what does this mean? What is this like? And so, for example, one thing that comes to mind is people do these kind of practices, right? And they actually look at their own mindedness, and they get down to this essentially mind 2. They can have this experiential reset of this knowingness that knows and then builds on top of this, but then not go woo woo with it, right? Not, get into some wild ontology of you're the center of something or what. There's a variety of ways where people can go astray. But the other angle is so there's this capacity for recognizing you are an epistemic portal, that you are in a very real, meaningful way, like an expression, of the cosmos trying to know itself in this form, right? And the way we know, as you talked about in the Kantian frame of it, that in many ways how we're knowing what we know is a construction, right? And so it is a construction, whether from a first person perspective, it's like thought and feeling, perception, and various schemas that come online. And you can know this, it's no longer an intellectual exercise. It's not a metaphysical belief in itself. It's like you literally can do the practices and know for yourself. It's a type of subjective empiricism to know that this is more like a construction. And then when I imagine a pink elephant, that's a simulation, right? So I moment to moment, one of the things I would say is, if I really take that in, I would say moment to moment, what I'm experiencing is a construction. It's a construction of a world model, a reality model with a world in it and a self in it and representation of other selves, right? Other beings that are arising in this reality model. And where we're trying to reconnect it and reconnect and attach to the rest of nature is saying, and that model, it is different. The model is arising out of this living organism as a minded animal and culture person.
Totally.
And so we're quickly embedding the ontology of a construction and a simulation as occurring within mindedness, which is a natural feature of our ontology, of our understanding of existence.
That's right. So mind 2 is modeling mind 1, and and that gives rise to this epistemic portal that lives inside this epistemic field. Right. And now we can situate that from the first person and say, oh, I can look at my contents. Okay. That's on the screen of the portal, and that sits inside this potential field. And all of that is modeling mindedness, mind 1. That's where it comes from. It's a virtual reality, mindedness. Okay. And that enables you to see the world a particular way because it's modeling you as an investing organism. That's what it. So now we can actually connect that to natural science, ontology, and phenomenology and epistemology. All that gets bound together. And what we're also saying is, actually that has enormous implications for how we connect to the world. John Vervaeke, the meaning crisis. We talk about the meaning crisis. Well, how do you get meaning in life? It's not what's the meaning of life. It's how is meaning found in life. Okay. And I would argue that actually all of these things a meta-systemic view. Oh my gosh, I'm going to learn something. I'm going to make a difference systemically. I'm going to change this. I'm going to understand this. I'll make a difference in education. Think about what your purpose could be meta-systemically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or a lot of us go into psychotherapy because actually the superpower of metacognitive awareness for people, we can watch people get trapped in the world, right? In their mind 3, mind 2 worlds, right? And relationally. And we can shine lights on that and help with that. And then the Buddha, for hundreds of thousands of years and thousands of years, people have been realizing that, oh my gosh, so much of suffering. To take the Buddhist, suffering is pain times resistance. What's the resistance? The self can't accept, doesn't know how to relate and accept. Well, meta-awareness, meta-attention are actually powerful tools to that. And then they reveal deeper and deeper truths about, say, non-dual. Well, what could be more part of meaning in life is when you realize you're a part to a whole that matters. Well, oh my God, that's a part whole matter, right? So all of these things, there's an avenue. This is what actually makes me really sad and hopeful, is I look back on what I learned, and there's so many avenues for meaning in life that were closed off to me, or not like some of them sort of intentionally closed off, but just not made of readily available as they could have been. And this meta-phenomenology, UTIC, for me, is like, this is just a signpost that says, here's meaning in life through attention and awareness and self-reflection and metasystemic understanding. So that's something.
That's something, right? Yeah. And
that's worth at least a cup of coffee.
That's right. That's right. So, yeah, our hope is that people can see that this is a revolutionary way of looking at mind in nature, mind as a behavior in other animals, and people as another layer of culture person, and then to look back in ourselves and actually explore our own minds. And that is a mind blower to actually say, in this moment, how I know myself is essentially a construction and a reality model emerging out of this living organism. And by the way, that living organism is intimately interconnected with with all of existence, right? The whole planes of existence are occurring for us to talk right now. Holy moly, right? And then we mentally simulate rather than just getting lost in the simulation, like use it as a superpower, right? Imagine using your imagination, right? Imagine as we rebuild societies, if we choose to do that, imagine that we're consciously imagining. We realize it's an imaginal goal that we're trying to go for, and let's use it wisely and accurately rather than just lost. Somehow something's got the wheel and it's just driving all over the road. Like, imagine we grab the wheel and try to be more intentional where we're going. And, depending on people listen to this, we just finished a presidential election, right? And to me, it was a beautiful, beautiful example of seeing how people got in their little model, the reality tunnels, right?
Yep.
There was a reality model, and both sides said, if the other one wins, it's the end of our country as we know it. And people who know me, realize I would actually say you've been hijacked emotionally if you think the other is completely evil. Like something happened to you. Please examine that.
I stuck that. I don't know if you saw, but I did a blog and I put that exact message in that blog. I said that you've been hacked. I stole that from you, and I should have given you credit. But here, at least, I can give you credit. That I basically said, if you believe this, your mind's been hacked. So anyway, that's a barren insight that I stole.
Which is amazing to say to people, right? Because they either go, "Oh," or they get really mad. Like my friends. Of course,
it's like, you idiot. Like, do you realize that Trump is going to push the button, or do you realize that this is the end of elections and woke will dominate our minds completely? Don't you understand?
That's right. That's right. So we live in a time where understanding mindedness, understanding one's own mindedness, running that you're operating within, like what you as a self, as a person, is something arising and interconnected with the mind. So it also means we have an epistemic portal that's a field from the inside, but the fields are interacting, right?
Yeah.
So your epistemic, if we're both two portals and from the inside we're fields, the fields are interacting and they change each other, right? Through processes of justification and mirroring behavior, we're changing our reality bubbles and we're making tunnels together, right? And here we are going back to the presidency for a second of like, wow, did like look at just how far off the tracks these folks we have gone where we couldn't see each other. We couldn't
Totally.
actually understand and to actually say, well, what if I actually looked at the other, right? Imagine this exercise for anybody who's like, I think this is still crap. What's going on in that person, the other that you decide? What's going on in their reality model construction of how they view themselves in the world? What's going on in their reality model simulation, right? That has scared them to act in a certain way.
Totally.
All right. And then what are the justifications that are used personally and collectively to shape the imaginal simulation and the construction that other people are seeing? I mean,
Totally.
so from one frame, this is highly theoretical and experiential, maybe at an individual level, but we're trying to say, no, actually understanding mindedness and understanding ontology, epistemology, our theory of reality, how we know what we know, has really big implications on how we live at a macro level civilization, but
Yep.
also on the micro level, right? Like
Totally.
whether my wife and I get in an argument or what are we both mentally simulating and
Yep.
projecting differently that we can't,
Totally.
right? To actually see each person as their own portal, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then
So
how
yeah,
those
I
portals
mean,
come
I
together.
really want to. This is great, and I think we can even just slow down really. So part of meta-phenomenology, as you explained it to me, as we were talking about, and sort of co-constructing, is like, hey, there's these constructions, okay, perceptual constructions. Actually, I'm opening my eyes. I see a cup. Okay, there's a cup out here, sort of, but there's also a cup in here. My mind too is simulating this, and my experience of my field with its contents is a cup, but that's actually a construction. Okay, and then if I like, oh, I like Wordle, right? I like, and then I thought I played Wordle yesterday. I have memory and projection about what kernel. Oh, I beat my dad in Wordle. Oh, hey, that means and I've got dad issues, so there it is. That's a good thing in relation. So look at all of the narrative about how the simulation. Then that's what comes up memory, and so that's your simulator. You take constructions,
Mhm.
then you simulate, and then you justify based on this. Okay. And let me zoom in and make this kind of real, okay? Because this is what I
Mhm.
struggle with, okay?
Mm.
Like I struggle with here's where I'll just say I'm a never Trumper, okay? In terms
Mhm.
of that's where, and I love the idea about whether or not I've been hacked, but my anti Barron justification is actually, did you see what happened on January 6th? Okay.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
here's an essay on January 6th that says Trump's capable of lying and manipulating. And I can see that a lying, manipulated person will get into an impulsive act relative to Putin, relative to North Korea, relative to the situation, start doing things that bounces everything around in a completely unstable way, and the catastrophe is upon us. Oh my God. Okay. If you don't hate that, you got a problem. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
Notice, so note here, I'm just saying, like, and actually, there's a part of me that does have that as a belief, and I like to pay attention to what my real beliefs, and
Mhm.
then the trick is what's the right grip? Oh, there's a
Mhm.
there's a grip. I don't know. And what is that? Should I spend my entire life then doing whatever I can to prevent Trump? Well, actually, what don't I know in relationship to that? What is possible in relationship? What's possible on the other side? On all sorts of different possibilities. And so then for me, then the dance is all this is the toggle between self and awareness. Okay. And the
Mhm.
capacity to basically be like, hey, that doesn't mean I'm always going to say, oh, both sides are fine, right? I don't have any beliefs that I commit to. That's not what this means. Okay. But what I sure as hell can do is I can watch my constructions, simulations, and justifications. Okay.
Mhm.
And I can see what I'm attached to. And then I can ask, what's adaptive in relationship to that? What do I know awareness wise? What is my justification? Where am I coming from? Where are you coming from? And so forth. And it is
Mhm.
that complexification, but then ask, well, what's adaptive given that? That's a different way of being. Then, oh my God, right? So I
100%.
just offer that as a way of framing. So if people are listening to this being, wait, I have real beliefs here, brother. What are you saying? Right? And of course
Yes,
you could do the other side with woke 2.0 or whatever your attachment is, right?
that's right. Oh, that's beautiful, Greg. And to say what we're saying, own that initial reaction too, right? Like, holy shit, what just happened? Like, own that, whatever you're feeling, or that'll lead to its own problem. But then what you're also saying is now I can investigate my own mindedness, and I can actually look at what are my constructions, what are my simulations, and what are my justifications.
Totally.
And then you brought up the great one of like, and then what's my attachment to them, right? Because yeah, what's going on there is really important, right? That's where we've learned something really new, usually about ourselves, when we kind of look at that. And so that's at the what we can do is ideally more wise, matured human beings that are still, fallible and
Mm-hmm.
still learning and going to mess up, right? That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't go away. But imagine then as we get more and more human beings together that can look at and actually recognize like a construction, a simulation, and a like when am I getting lost in my simulations,
Totally.
right? I see this in neurosis all the time. Um,
Absolutely.
what about my construction? It's and people can even if they don't want to go the route we took, like just even think about what science teaches you. Like things are mostly made of space and interacting fields, and you could just look at the whole thing and go, wow, my phenomenology is here for fitness, not to tell me that a more accurate model of what's happening.
Totally.
But to then say, what happens when we as human beings from this meta-phenomenology view, recognize like where, construction, simulation, and justification, those almost become, if thought, feeling, perception, in emotion, thought, feeling, perception, or the building blocks or aggregates of this initial
Nice term.
model.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
When we go intersubjective, it's this mix of construction, simulation, and justification
Totally.
that go into what we call objective, right? Like, so you talked about the coffee cup, or so here's a coffee cup, and we could drop it, and it'll keep what we if we said we want to study gravity and do mathematics about it, we basically constrained our intersubjective construction, where
Totally.
there's like something
That
we
is
could
what
agree.
science does, exactly.
That's it.
And it seeks what David Deutsch called actually good explanations. There's a whole
Yeah.
set of justificatory
Right.
constraints that
Right.
then build science through. It's an intersubjective
Right.
system.
Right. And then you could think about our political philosophies, and our politics in part are a constrainment of our intersubjective simulation.
That's right.
What ought to be. So not just what is, but what ought to be. And how do
Absolutely.
we agree? And guess
Right.
what? I will add, I would, kind of preaching to the choir here, but like, think about even go into the politics for a second, Trump and Harris, and how each side gives its counter justificatory story to combat anything the other side says. So is that mean we just stay as human beings like caught in this just dialect? It's not even a dialectic; it's just opposing
There's a
each other.
dichotomy. Yeah, it's opposing
Or
dichotomies,
is there a
basically.
higher order accuracy perhaps available if we look at, try to take in these justifications, or is there even, and I kind of come from this place of like saying, I don't like either of those boxes, by the way, and people who know me know that I don't like either of these boxes. So, can we imagine, can we simulate a different kind of box? Could we of what how we want to constrain our intersubjective
Love it.
imagination, how we're viewing the world, and what we ultimately agree to do together? And so this mindedness revolution, understanding one's mind, being able to show up in a more wise, compassionate, and freeing way is actually really important. I mean, even if you wanted to be selfish about it, it's like, don't you want to be like happier and like feel more free and not have it, have all the strings? Part of it is we're talking about the puppet strings that are arise in our own mindedness that
Ah,
are
I
just
love
driving
that,
the show. And to be
dude.
like, I actually want to start to learn to move some within my own distributed agency, right? I'm not saying I got all the strings. That also is an illusion, but there's this bottom up and top down and within and across that allows an agency now, and I'm trying to free it.
Dude, that
I'm
is
trying to reduce its conditioning
right.
that's been running in it for a long time, right?
We happen to watch Godfather yesterday, and I don't know
Sure.
if you remember, but Godfather has the puppet strings as that is it's if you go to see the icon of the Godfather, it's the puppet, and you can watch you just watch these folks who are just born into the family, right? And they're born into the male and female roles of the family and born into the traditions and all of this. And it's all just then defined as to who's going to rise and who doesn't, who's weak, who's strong, who kills who. And it is just framed as in the constructions and simulations. And they have real world consequences.
Yes.
Watch the film. A lot of people just die. But the
Right.
world that they live within is so real to them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And yet
Mm-hmm.
you can also be a human being and look at that and be like, wow, that's essentially just delusional. Right? Like at one
Yeah.
level, like, and if you lived in Africa, all of that in a particular tribe, or me living where I live, or you can look from the outside and you're like, what the hell is that? Right? It's a totally
Mm-hmm.
constructed, simulated, justificatory network, and you could break it all up and still be grounded in the world in a different way. So anyway,
Mm-hmm.
watch other systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do their gripping, their constructing and simulating, and watch them as it's just transparent to them that this is the world it has to be. And then where you're seeing is that puppet strings, right? That's what we're offering you. That's what we're saying. You if you didn't know it already, you're a puppet, right? You've been hacked. You're a puppet. We're still quarter puppets, but we can be aware. And man, is that freeing?
Mm-hmm.
And man, does that open up a lot of different things. And there's a pathway to that I don't think has been available before with a level of depth and coherence here in this Minded Revolution thing.
Amen to that, brother. It's so true, though. I mean, what,
It is.
in retrospect, maybe would have been a better sell of like reclaim your life and that you never knew
There's
you
a
had.
secret. Oh shit! We could have saved us as a secret. But yeah. But there is cut the strings. So at least see the strings for the love of God, and then you'll
That's
see the
it.
freedom that emerges.
That's it. And then, and to imagine just in the most ideal form as science has built in it a mechanism for autocorrection. Granted, there's lots of problems with how that happens, but still. And so the idea, can I develop within myself the capacity for autocorrection, including on the justifications, the simulations, and the constructions, right?
Lovely.
So I have tinnitus. I have scotomas. I have weird taste in my tongue. If I believed all my senses, I'd be in a little bit of trouble. Okay. Same with my thoughts and feelings. Half of them are probably inaccurate, right? As I explore them. I learn to compassionately on them. Yeah.
Beautiful, and at that right. So do I. I have tinnitus, moderate, and actually I had sabbatical. I'll just tell the story real fast, and then we can start to wrap up. Just in terms of the freeing of what this is, and thankfully I'm trained in a particular way, so it really started to bug me. Probably because I was on sabbatical. I mean, I was spending a lot of time in the house alone and quiet. And if the way the normal system works is essentially it's filling in what it expects to see there, but it's not, and then it basically fills in a static, so you get a and I initially described it propositionally. In other words, the construction was this sensation, and then the simulation into the justification was it's nails on a chalkboard. Notice how I said that. It's like nails on a chalkboard. Okay, see my entire embodiment? That doesn't sound great. Nails on the chalkboard in your head all the time. And then as it started to really bother me, I was like, it's like crickets in the evening. I like crickets in the evening. Okay. And then because I'm mindful, it's like, oh, watch my self-conscious system try to grip it, try to judge it, try to frame it, right? Rather than just be. Okay. So anyway, those are just some examples of like if you relate to your system in a different, cut the strings, see the strings, relate to the strings, what would grab you potentially and drive you into it. I mean, people actually get depressed by that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Actually, psychological flexibility is really rare, available.
Yeah. No, and I was able in real time, or I would say real time, in time, able to kind of watch the type of justification you use, the type of mental simulation like on the chalkboard versus crickets, like what I actually then constructively felt, including how my body felt, like a little more tight versus a little more loose. So we're doing this to ourselves all day long, and we're
All day.
doing this to each other all day long. And then at a macro level, we're doing it at another level, depending on heavy simulation and justification to build that simulation. And it'd be like, hello, y'all. Let's kind of wake up to these puppet strings, these schemas that are embedded in our mindedness to actually recognize we are this mindedness, in a sense, rooted out of and emerging from these deeper layers of complexification. And there's a way to then revisit the mind, subjectivity in an examined way, but also there's a space and a place for imagination. And what do we want to imaginate and simulate together? And that's subjectivity and that's intersubjectivity. And it has a place in our world. And by the way, we're not getting rid of the objective justification systems of science. We're saying this is beautiful too. It's not the whole map of reality, but it's a critically important one that's changed how we can operate in the world. And so there's a place for all of these in a more examined vectors of knowledge, right? So
Beautiful. So I can see now the little puppet. We can label it, hey, the scene, it is Mind4, the little strings. We get down. Normally you're through awareness, through attention, through yourself, inside of systems. We climb out. Oh, at least see the strings. And get a lot more freedom through awareness, attention, the self, and the system. So there it is, folks. The Mind4 Meta-Phenomenology across those 4 different branches that we've laid out. That's a lovely thing for us to play around with and grow through. So I deeply appreciate all your work on that and this little journey in relationship to it.
Yeah, thank you, Gregg, for creating the space for us to explore this together. And so I'm hopeful our audience is able to take some of this in, contribute to it. We're at the beginning of something we're trying to.
Amen. Right. What's got the ripple effects of, I say, be a good ancestor, Mm-hmm. So there it is.
Let's say be a good descendant, right? So
think about yes,
all of not the model, but reality itself that got us here now.
Amen.
Can we show up as a good descendant,
and be a good ancestor?
Absolutely.
That's Mind4. All right. Lovely. Take care. All right. All right, man. Hey, that was great.
Woo-hoo.
Yes,
that was good. So I guess at this point, kind of thinking directions of, yay! Before I think about what's next.
Let's just calm and be aware. Huh.
So, this has been super fun. And I think we got us to a place that was 12 episodes that we did.
Yeah, 12.
Yeah.
My gut says, go ahead.
So I'll there's a couple of ways that I would think about. One would be dive deeper into the subjective or the eutic and go through meta context, kind of like what was in the articles in the context of what we just talked about, but meta context, ontology of self, epistemic knowing, axiology, eschatology. So that would be one way, dive down deeper into the subjective. And then another would be kind of opening back into perhaps intersubjective, or maybe not even use that word, but how does that fit into our fields? What does that look like in mental health? What does that look like?
That's the way I would. So, I think we should sort of think about this as phase 1.
Yeah.
And also maybe even pause, like the way we're releasing them. We could still continue to meet. I actually can't meet next week, but
same.
I'm wondering that just watching we don't have a huge audience, and coming out twice a week is a lot for the system to try to stay with. And then if people get behind and it is building, it's hard for the system to like catch up. We're not going to get new viewers at episode 10 who haven't seen episode 9. Okay.
Gotcha.
So
play catch up first.
So we're running through there's a whole course, and we have about 100 people so far that have basically probably been with the course, more or less. Okay. Or maybe 50, which is great. I mean, but we're going to, the nature of the blocking. So I think we need to the thought this morning, we should probably let people catch up at some level. And
Okay.
then the other thought that makes me want to go the second idea is
Hmm.
that you and I, eschatology and blah blah. Okay, like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we're slicing it. The fact of the matter is, 99.9% of people are going to hear eschatology. I don't know what that is. I'm out. At a general level,
True.
obviously, we already
True.
pulled a subset. But here's what a lot of people care about: depression, anxiety,
It's true.
schizophrenia, psychology, clinical, and psychiatry. Okay. So my vote would be for us to think we've got plenty in the hopper, and if we take a little break, and I'm not saying we should stop, but maybe in 2 weeks, here's what
Mhm.
I'd like to do. I'd like to think about psychology, psychiatry, and mental health, based on what we've done. And I think we've laid, to me, what we've done. I think I told you this, okay? But my friend Waldemar, okay,
Yeah.
as a psychiatrist, pathologist, well, pathologist interested in psychiatry, came to me at one
Which,
point
by the
as
way, is a common thing. It's so
a,
bizarre.
yeah,
Why does the person who just wants to look at cells get into the mind? But
right.
anyway, yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
as I think told you this. If I haven't, certainly have it. He's like, he came to me one day after he learned about my theory, and he was like, Greg, as a pathologist, do you know what the first thing I learned about the ovaries, the liver, and the kidney were? What healthy ovaries, liver, and kidney look like.
Oh, interesting.
Do you know what I've never seen in psychiatry? What the healthy mind looks like.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay? So the psychiatry only knows deviation because it doesn't have the framework to specify what would it be to be a healthy person. You have the authority in psychiatry to say, well, that's fucked up. Okay.
That's all I get. I don't get
Right?
to tell
But you
you
don't
what.
get to say that guy within normative behavior, that guy's better than that guy.
That's right. That's
Right?
right.
Okay. So there's the dilemma, right? It's like, oh, that's an even healthier person. Okay. You don't have that. Well, that's unbelievably interesting at one level. And why? And there's lots of good reasons, of course, you and I can immediately understand. But you and I are actually making some points about what healthy mindedness is. And
Yes,
that's not a bad thing for psychiatrists and psychologists to be
that's
able
right.
to point to. So I'd like to for us to seriously consider the sort of a second phase on what is healthy mindedness, from
I like
psychiatry and
that.
psychology.
Question: would you foresee, or how do you see um, the this in relationship to part one? Meaning, is it that people need to have watched the first 12 to kind of get some of the language, and because we could leak in like construction and simulation, and people are going to be like, what the hell are they talking about?
Totally.
Or Mind 4, and like, what the hell are they talking about? So do we keep it separate, or do we integrate it but also be mindful of like people may not be useful to the language? What
That's
any initial thoughts?
that require that's so all of this is novel, and we have time. So let's variation, selection, retention it, and see where we land.
Yeah, yeah, I like
I
that.
don't know, but
Fair enough.
I would just say we're actually at the cusp of part two. My gut tells me bring in mental health somehow. Maybe you start a whole nother, Mindedness Revolution, mental health concerns, and then go start episode one, and then be bringing. I don't know, but that could be a way of thinking about it.
That would
Let
be
me.
interesting, right? Whether like there may be some kind of way where I mean, this is just initial thought, like
All right.
nothing, but like some kind of summary
Mm-hmm.
of the first 12,
Yep.
and then like we're gonna jump into
Totally.
mental
Right. So
health,
bracket off
healthy mind.
when you and I first started talking, part of me was like, we should have a channel on discussing mental health from clinical psychology and psychiatry. That you and I
Yeah,
are in place to. I mean, from the outside, you would
big
think our
time.
disciplines would be able to get along, and the
Yeah.
answer is only sort of. All right, from the
Yeah,
inside, as we know. So anyway, let me think about this. I got to run now because I'm getting a little late for something else. But
sure.
let me blow.
So let's chew on it.
Let's
We'll
chew
have
on
a
it.
little
It's a
time and
text,
chew on
and
it
I will
and
see you in 2 weeks. We'll
yeah,
text in between, and voila.
yeah.
Let's do it.
Sounds
All right,
great.
man. Lovely.
Thank you, Greg.
Hey, take care. I enjoyed it.
You bet. Likewise.